98 little houses stood at attention on my father's pasture like toy soldiers. Someone forgot to put away pastel paint, gleaming white fences, winking in the morning sun. And for a second, I forgot to breathe. Then the breath came back as a hot, mean thing, because those houses were lined up on land. I swore I'd never sell land. With my name stamped on the deed in ink that hadn't had time to fade. From the ridge I could see everything. The creek on the west side, the oak grove to the east, the dirt road where I taught myself to drive a stick shift when I was 16, and I could see her too. The woman in the siren red pantsuit with sunglasses big enough to double as a shield, marching through the job site like a parade marshal pointing at shrubs, barking at concrete trucks, smiling, that smile that says the rules are for other people, not for queens. Make the hedges symmetrical, she snapped, clapping twice like an audience of one. And those driveways better shine, and the workers jumped because her name carried weight in Redwater County. Madeline Cross, president of the brand new Homeowners Association of a place that did not legally exist. Let me back up a sec. My name's Evan Hart. I raised cattle and bad ideas on 300 acres my father fought to keep, and the paper I carried that day wasn't just nostalgia. It was the original title with my dad's signature, and mine notarized, indexed, blessed by the county clerk, 10 different ways. And still, they built, they sold. They staged open houses with lemonade on the counters, like this was a catalog. And you know what I mean, right? How disrespect can sound like laughter floating up a hill. When I walked down the gravel, the hammers slowed. The whispers rose, and Madeline turned to me with that public relations grin that never touches a person's eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice dipped in syrup. Yeah, I said, keeping the papers behind my back like a magic trick. You can explain why you put 98 houses on land that's mine down to the last blade of winter grass. Her smile flickered just a blink, then returned like a light on a bad circuit. You must be confused. Mr. Hart, I said, and the name hung there, familiar to the old hands on site. I'm not confused. Ms. Cross, I'm patient, and I'm armed with paperwork. She laughed, a brittle sound that cut the air. We purchased this property from the county, all permits in order. Families already moving in. You have no right to be here. You bought something the county didn't own? I said, stepping close enough to see the first crack in her lipstick smile. I've held title for 20 years. The creek to the oak grove, to the old cattle guard you're standing in my front yard and calling it a cul-de-sac. That was the moment the ground shifted, or maybe it was just her knees, because my phone buzzed and I answered without looking away. Go, I said. My lawyer's voice came through steady. The injunction signed. Evan, serve it now, and I pulled the folded court order from behind my back like a magician producing a dove, handed it to her, watched her eyes race over the words that were about to wreck her day. Maybe her decade. You have 24 hours to vacate, I said, calm, because anger's only useful when it's quiet. The entire development is enjoined, every nail, every mailbox, every little pastel fantasy. This isn't over, she hissed, color draining, then returning too bright like paint slapped on wet wood. Oh, I know, I said, it's just getting interesting. By sunset, the moving vans idled like nervous horses. The workers packed their tools, and the families looked at me the way people look at black clouds, like I was the storm. Then I went home, turned on the fireplace, opened Zoom, and mapped the next week with my lawyer until the screen felt like a friend. Except friends don't make you check the window every 5 minutes. The rock came first, crashing through glass, scattering sparks from the fire, a note tied in thick black ink that said, "Leave this land or else." And I stood there with the wind crawling through broken panes, telling myself fear is information, not instruction. Then the black SUV parked at my gate at dawn engine, idling windows, dark, waiting 10 long minutes just to remind me I wasn't alone, then rolling away like a threat with headlights. You know what I mean? How a quiet engine can be louder than a gun. I called the one person besides my lawyer who never flinched at a mess, Marisol Reed, a reporter who knows where the bodies are buried because she's the one who digs. We met at the diner, coffee burnt pie. Perfect. And when I slid the deed across the formica, she leaned in like a detective in a movie. You're telling me she said pen already moving. They built an entire subdivision on land they didn't bother to title search. They counted on nobody pushing back. I said counted on paper being complicated and people being tired. Yeah, that happened, she murmured, eyes narrowing. Mind if I pull some threads? Pull the whole sweater, I told her. Just don't publish until I say go. I can't fight in 2 arenas at once. That night my barn lit up like a funeral flames along the south wall, accelerant in the dirt. Me with a garden hose, coughing, swearing, buying enough time for the volunteer fire crew to save half the sheriff walking the ash line with a flashlight, jaw tight. Not an accident, he said. And I nodded, because obviously. The next morning, the deputy served the stop work order on site, and the hammers went silent in a way that felt almost sacred, and Madeline stormed toward me with a phone glued to her ear. Do you have any idea what you've done? Families are panicking. Investors are furious. You did this? I said, not raising my voice. You built where you had no right, and then set my barn on fire to scare me off, and now you're mad the brakes work. As if cued, a cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out with a notice, and the site froze under the words, "Halt, all construction and sales," and the echo of, "This isn't over," followed me to my truck. And here's the part where the story tilts. Midnight engines without headlights, men in black clothing, digging behind the newest row of houses, hauling out long crates by moonlight, while a red SUV idled at the far end, not hidden enough for me to miss the driver's silhouette, arms folded, head tilted, watching them like a boss grading a test. I filmed what I could called the sheriff, watched the truck scatter when the sirens showed up, watched an officer block Madeline's exit and take her statement while she pointed at me like I'd personally invented law enforcement, then drove home to a text from a number with no name. You have no idea what you're in, back off. And yeah, I slept with the lights on. Don't make me lie. In the morning, I flew a drone over the site because curiosity is a moral failing and also my best skill, and that's when I saw it. A patch of disturbed soil by a porch that still smelled of paint, a hand reaching up from the earth like a bad dream. And by the time the sheriff's team dug it out, the smell told a story before the tarp did. The crowd gasped, the cameras clicked, and Madeline tried to leave and didn't get far. Her lawyer argued the judge didn't blink. The site became a crime scene faster than you can say, chain of custody. And Marisol was already tracing old maps, old lawsuits, old rumors about Paladin minerals, and a 1970s fight over rare ore under red water. A case that went quiet when the market crashed and the county buried the plan. Some secrets ferment instead of dying. Twist number 1. Marisol's father worked that case. As a young public defender, disappeared from the record a year later. Never talked about why. And sometimes the story you chase is the one that chases you back. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I got grabbed. Yeah, that happened. Yanked into a van by a man in a ski mask. Zip ties, burning my wrists. Dumped in a shed that smelled like rain and rust. And the guy sat on a crate, like we were about to play cards. "You should have stayed out," he said, voice flat. "This land is worth killing for." People keep telling me that I said because humor is my bad habit. Nobody says worth living for. Funny how that works. He leaned in until I could hear him breathe. The last guy who asked questions ended up under that porch. Then he left me with the quiet and a broken metal bracket on the wall I used like a saw piece by piece, until freedom felt like blood running back into numb hands, and I ran through a dark field toward the road and flagged down an old rancher who did not ask enough questions but drove fast. By then the story had already mutated. The families vanished overnight. Toys in yards, TVs buzzing, dinner plates half-eaten. A note stapled to the entrance sign in red paint that dripped like theater blood. "You're next. And if you've never walked a silent neighborhood that should be noisy, it hits your bones." not your ears. Law enforcement blanketed the site, ground-penetrating radar mapped anomalies like constellations under the cul-de-sacs, and the beeps lined up with the worst possibilities while men with rifles appeared at the tree line and disappeared again. Whenever sirens grew teeth and Madeline, cornered, furious, snapped at me. You have no idea who you're dealing with. And for once, I believed her. Then the diggers hit metal. Not a coffin, a door rusted, sealed big enough to hide a thesis, and a monster. The bunker under 3 houses, crates stamped with symbols I didn't recognize, old mining tools, newer equipment, small containers that hummed faintly like they were alive, and an agent held one up and did not smile. Whatever this is, the sheriff said, it's what they'd burn your life down to protect, which is exactly what they tried. A sniper's crack from the trees, officers diving behind trucks returned fire, sparking off rebar. Marisol crouched with a camera because she's braver than smart. And I say that with love. Then the gunfire faded. The forest swallowed the shooters and blue lights washed the hillside as state troopers rolled in. Then bigger jackets with 3 letters arrived, and the field grew bright enough to fake noon. Madeline ran, of course she did, picked up at a motel near the highway with a fresh wig and a bad passport. And when they walked her past me, she gave me this look. People save for funerals. You think you've won? She said, voice soft as a match. You haven't met my friends, and I believe that too. At 2 a.m, the ground moved, first a growl, then a punch from below. The bunker erupted, the subdivision lit like a cornfield. In August, windows blew, shockwaves rolled, and the evidence we'd bled to uncover turned into ash and silence, and a rain of glittering fragments that weren't pretty at all. And when dawn crept in on the heels of smoke, a lone drone buzzed the fence line and projected a message onto my barn in red light. You survived this time, but the war isn't over. Act 3 isn't about explosions. Not really. It's about what's left afterward. About standing in the oak grove with soot on your boots and a clipboard full of names. My father's dog tags warm in my fist because I'd been holding them too long about planting survey stakes back in the ground and telling the sheriff, the feds, the cameras. We're not moving an inch about, walking the creek and remembering a man who told me, land is a story you keep telling or somebody else will rewrite it for you. Marisol aired the first piece. Careful, relentless names, redacted evidence, linked her voice steady as a metronome. And the internet did what it does. Howl, argue, connect dots that shouldn't be connected, and a few that needed connecting. And people came out of the woodwork with tales of paladin this and county official that. While the lab put a tentative name to the first body and a hard date on the second, and the families who fled started calling lawyers, because fear fades when a mortgage keeps billing. Meanwhile, some nights are still loud. The deputy posted outside my gate went missing for an hour. He couldn't explain a truck idled at the edge of my pasture with its lights off until the dog barked it away and texts kept coming like gnats. You don't know the tree you're shaking. You're not the hero. You think maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just stubborn enough to be useful. A week later, I met Madeline's eyes across an interview table. Federal custody, no sunglasses, nothing red, and for the first time she looked small. Not sorry, just small. And I asked the question. You always ask at the end of a chess game, you didn't mean to start. Who's behind you? And she smiled the saddest smile I've ever seen. Everyone you vote for, she said. Which is a good line and also nonsense, but it's the kind of nonsense that keeps people afraid. So here we are, the houses are gone. The oak grove still throws long shadows at sunset. I've got plywood where my living room window used to be and a new camera on the fence post. I sleep with boots by the door and the shotgun within reach. Not because I'm a cowboy, but because I'm tired of being polite to people who torch barns at midnight. And on certain nights when the wind carries smoke that isn't there, I sit on the porch and talk to my dad like he's just around back, fixing something with baling wire. I tell him we made some noise, we found some truth, we lost a lot of peace on the way, and I tell him I'm not done, not by half. Maybe justice is a slow machine that only moves when enough of us lean our shoulders into it. Maybe property rights are only as real as the people who show up in daylight with deeds and cameras and a refusal to be embarrassed by paperwork. Maybe corruption is just gravity and you need a winch to fight it. You know what I mean? So that's the story, not polished, not finished, still breathing. If you were sitting here on this porch with me, I'd pour you coffee that tastes like a burned apology and ask what you think a fair ending looks like, because I'm not here to salt the earth. I'm here to make sure the next kid who inherits a pasture doesn't wake up to a cul-de-sac. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's HOA newsletter, well, yeah, that happened. The last image I'll leave you with is the ridge at dusk. The creek whispering the oaks, holding the sky up like old friends, the field, where the houses used to be laid out in blackened rectangles, like empty pages, and me walking a straight line with fresh stakes and orange tape planting them one by one, each thud of the mallet, a small vow, each ribbon a boundary someone will think is negotiable until it isn't. And at the far fence I stop, watch the sun drop behind the hill, and say out loud to nobody and to everybody, we're still here. Tell me where you land on this. What does justice look like when a smiling board and a friendly county office try to rewrite the map under your feet? When money starts digging in the dark, when threats become fires and fires become evidence? Where's the line between standing your ground and lighting the fuse, and who gets to draw it? Drop your thoughts below. Whether your team, property rights team, community, or standing somewhere in the messy middle, because that's where most of us live. And if this story made you mad, good. Maybe anger is just care that's finally awake.